Hi, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Mighty Emotions podcast. Today, we are talking about how to begin noticing our emotions. We talk about what are the mental blocks that prevent us from noticing them in the first place. We get into, how to start small and grow and build from there, and how it gets easier and easier as we do. And I also give you my 3-point tip, my little emotional triangle tip for how you can start to dig for clues to figure out how you're feeling. So if you want to learn how to start naming your emotions and naming your feelings, then keep listening. Hi, welcome back to another episode of the Mighty Emotions podcast. I am excited today to be recording again. I hope that the message I share today helps someone listening and resonates with you. Today I want to get into how we begin to identify our feelings, right? Because the first step to building emotional resilience is to know what emotions we're experiencing. And when we've numbed for so long and distracted for so long and denied for so long, we don't know what we're feeling. The most common answer I get to the question of what are you feeling is, I don't know. And I didn't know. When I first got clean, when I first put down drugs, when I first decided to go into recovery, I had no idea what I was feeling. And it's taken a long time and a lot of practice, right? Like I said, emotional resilience is practice. But we can get there if we start by first asking ourselves, do I want to know how I'm feeling? Do I want to know? Do I want to figure this out? Do I want to live a life of peace? Do I want to grow? Right? Because if we're not ready for it, then it's not going to work. And I want to start off by stressing, and really, really stressing, that I'm talking about how we identify our feelings, not how we identify as our feelings or with our feelings, right? We have the tendency to say, I am sad or I am angry, as if it's our identity. And our emotions are not our identity. Our emotions are a part of us, but they are not us, right? It's no different than I have a heart. I'm not my heart. I'm not a heart, right? So I just want to start off by saying this because I think we tend to personify emotions. We tend to create them into these characters that we don't want to be associated with, right? Maybe we see an angry person as this and we don't want to acknowledge that we're angry because we're not an angry person. We're not like that. And we don't need to add any more shame to what we feel, right? We've internalized all these messages that are, not true a lot of the time about our feelings, and it keeps us blocked from being able to move into a space of emotional resilience. So the first thing you ask is, do I want to know how I feel? And the second thing is, how am I looking at my emotions right now? Am I open to even acknowledge and accept that I have these emotions? What is the obstacle here? Right? I really want to stress not to over-identify with your emotions, that they're all completely normal and natural things that are a part of us. You can see them as visitors that are coming to bring you a message or coming to bring us messages, right? Like when you experience a feeling, it's not you. It doesn't take over who you are, right? Unless you let it. And so I needed to stress that early on, because if we can't move past that fear and that shame that we have associated with certain emotions, then it's going to be very difficult for us to move into a mindset that allows us to grow through these emotions, right? We have to be willing to work with them. And there's a reason that acceptance is the first principle in recovery, because when we become aware of something, we also need to be accepting of it so that we can work with it. We need to accept the reality that we're in so that we can move forward in it, right? So I want you to think about that. I want you to just think about how you feel about certain emotions. Are they, what are the negative associations you have with them? And how can you start to separate yourself and separate your identity from how you're feeling? Careful of the language that you use. Like, instead of saying I am sad, you can say I feel sad, or I'm experiencing sadness, right? It's a part of you, but it's not you, right? And in that way, you can kind of begin to work with it. And so once you've acknowledged that and you're ready to work with your emotions, how do you identify them, right? For me, when I got clean, it was overwhelming, to be experiencing everything. But we can't work with everything all at once. We need to take it in steps. And so the first thing is to pick one emotion. Pick one circumstance, whatever's the most pressing circumstance that's causing you the most distress. Look at that and see what is the most prominent feeling. Like I said, we know what our feelings are. We often just have blocks to accepting them or acknowledging them. But we do know what our feelings are if we really get honest with ourselves and we get quiet and we listen to what's coming up, right? So whatever's the most pressing circumstance in your life, what is the primary emotion that's tied to that? When I first got clean, it was a breakup that led me to that place and was causing me so much distress. And I had to say to myself, okay, what am I feeling around this breakup? Well, I was feeling a lot of things. Let me tell you, it wasn't a clean break. But I decided to focus on the sadness that I felt. And I said, okay, I'm feeling sad. And I started to just notice what that was like. Notice what that felt like in my body. Notice what thoughts were associated with that. Notice how that sadness felt for me and not to resist it. What did the energy of that sadness feel like? And I had to really sit with it. I sat with it for a long time. I shared about it. I told other people about the fact that I was feeling that. I journaled about it. I didn't run from it. Right? I noticed it. I acknowledged it. I honored it. Right? And so pick one emotion, whatever is the most distressing thing in your life right now, whatever's the main primary emotion, and just work with that. Just get acquainted with that. Maybe meditate on it, journal about it, call it up and notice it, and notice how you experience that, because we all experience our emotions differently, right? They're diverse and unique depending on our background, our circumstances, and all of that. So getting to know one emotion intimately will kind of help you learn how to know the other emotions when the time comes, right? And then some of you may say, look, I don't know. I really don't know, right? I want to know, but I really don't know. How can I figure out what I'm feeling? And in that case, I like to say, look for clues, become your own private investigator of yourself. Become, determined and intentional with looking at, what you're feeling by looking at 3 specific things. So I call it like the emotional triangle. And it's basically looking to see, what thoughts am I having? What physical sensations am I having, and how am I behaving? And looking at where those 3 intersect to kind of show you what the core emotion that's playing out is. So I have a link in the show notes. If you're interested, I have like a little quiz called the What Am I Feeling quiz. And it's basically where you just tick all the responses that apply to you. There's 3 columns: thoughts, behaviors, and sensations, like bodily sensations, and tally up, based on the letters that are there. And it should give you, what core emotion you're experiencing. And you'll notice that a lot of the, responses have multiple letters, because Our emotions are fluid. They're not rigid. They're not fixated. They're not just one thing. Like I said, they're diverse for all of us. And a lot of the times they share similar traits. So for example, I might be feeling like my heart might be beating fast and I might be feeling all this energy and I might be really busy and just moving frantically and behaving really like frantic. And hearing that, you might think, well, you're anxious, right? But what if I told you that my thoughts were really positive and I was just full of ideas and I was really motivated? Well, now it's excitement, right? And so if I had just gone off the behaviors, or I had just gone off the physical sensations, I might misunderstand how I was feeling, misunderstand the emotion. Remember, the emotions are the containers for our feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. They all work together, and the emotion is just the label that we put on it to begin to work with it and understand it, right? We give it a name, we give it a face, we give it, life by containing it so we can work with it. And so I really encourage you to study yourself and see, like, what behaviors am I engaging in? Am I eating junk food? Am I rude with people? Am I short with people? Am I depleted and just like vegging out, or just, sleeping all the time? And then what am I thinking? Like, are my thoughts really critical? Are my thoughts really positive? Are my thoughts really negative? Think about all these different things and write them down and just notice them and take stock and see if you can triangulate which ones you are experiencing, and see, when you combine them, what emotion that is giving you, what emotion that is leading you to. So take the quiz if you'd like. I know I'm giving you kind of some homework here to take that quiz and see what it is that you're feeling, so that you can begin to do the work, right? So just to, recap, what I really wanted to convey on this episode is that to begin to be more emotionally resilient, we need to be able to name what we're feeling. We need to be able to notice what we're feeling. When we're experiencing discomfort, what is the discomfort? What is the emotion within the discomfort? And I want to know also that it requires being really specific. Like, it's not enough to say, this is the circumstance and so I feel this. What specifically about the circumstance is causing you to feel this way? And that is going to come in later on in other episodes when I talk about the other steps involved. But I really just wanted to focus on how to notice and how to name our emotions in this episode. And in order to do that, we need to be paying attention, but we need to also be open and willing to see it, right? We have to be willing to notice it. So looking at what are negative associations we might have with certain emotions, looking at where we're resistant to certain emotions, where we don't want to accept or acknowledge that we're human and we have these feelings too, that they don't define who we are, but they are a part of us. And they're there to kind of guide us, like I said in the first episode, back into alignment with ourselves. When we get out of alignment, they show up, they visit us to say, hey, something's off here. How do we get back into alignment with ourselves? Right? So removing those blocks, working through those mental blocks that we have towards accepting certain emotions, being willing to notice them, and then looking at one emotion at a time, just focusing on one and noticing what that one emotion shows up for us, how it shows up for us, and noticing the specifics around that emotion. Look, what is specifically happening, but what about what's happening is causing us to feel this way. So for example, if I'm rocking my daughter to sleep and she won't sleep, and I notice anger coming up, right? And I'm feeling anger. Am I angry because I'm rocking my daughter to sleep? Am I angry because she won't sleep? Am I angry because I want to sleep, right? Getting specific, by the way, I'm angry because I'm exhausted, but getting specific about what that anger is connected to is really, really important. And again, if you're struggling still, if you just like can't figure, like you can't name it, you're just not sure, you're really confused. And it's normal because a lot of the times we're feeling many emotions at once, right? We don't ever really feel just one emotion at a time. Something happens and there's different parts of that one circumstance that come with different emotions. So if you notice that you're feeling a lot of things, you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling so much, that's normal. That's totally okay. There's a reason for that, right? But picking apart things, breaking it down, compartmentalizing it, and saying, okay, I feel this, and I feel this specifically because of that, and focusing on that and not worrying about the rest for right now. Starting small, breaking it apart. And if you really can't name it, if you really don't know, then spending some time to investigate, how am I behaving? What thoughts am I having? Am I engaging in comfort behaviors? That might be sadness showing up for me. Am I engaging in, aggression? Anger might be showing up, disgust. Like there is a connection between all these things, right? There's a triangulation between how we're feeling physically. Is our breath really short? Are we rushing through the day? Are we out of breath? Are we tired? Are we fatigued? Like there's a connection between what our body is feeling and what our mind is thinking and what behaviors we're engaging in, that when you connect all those three clues, when you look for those clues, they can really show us what emotion we're likely feeling. Right. And still to this day, I have to look for clues. Like still to this day, sometimes I'll be like, what am I feeling? Like, I know that I feel off. I know that I feel discomfort, but am I angry? I don't really know if I'm angry. I don't know. And then I'll have to look at, okay, Giselle, what are you thinking? What sensations are you feeling in your body? What behaviors have you been engaging in recently? Have I been scrolling a lot, or have I been, just being rude to my husband? Like, what is it that's going on? Because so often we're just living our lives and we're not paying attention, but there's so many clues that can guide us to the answers that we seek. And it does require slowing down, and it does require being intentional. And sometimes it requires asking someone to mirror you, asking someone, hey, do I seem angry to you? Or, hey, how do I seem to you? And getting that feedback from someone else as well can be helpful sometimes. You want to make sure that it's someone you absolutely trust and someone that really has your best interest at heart. Right? And then anytime you take in information, consciously be aware to ask yourself if it feels true or not, before you put it on. Does it fit? Does it not fit? We are innately able to do this, and nobody else has to know that we honestly feel a certain way. If there's some shame around feeling anger, or if there's some shame around feeling sadness, because of messages that you've received or the environment that you're in, you don't need to tell anyone right away. But it's important that if you want to be more emotionally resilient, that you're aware of that, right? Because the work is happening inside of you, right? And to get support, we need to be able to ask for what we need, and we can't do that if we're not clear on it. So we really need to be specific about what's going on. What is the emotion? What is the specific issue that's connected to it, right? It takes work. I'm not going to lie. It takes effort. It takes time. It takes patience, and it takes a willingness because of all of that, right? But if you want to experience peace and you want to experience growth, right? I'm not even going to say healing, but if you want to experience navigating life in a way that is kind to yourself, is restorative, is gentle, then there's a way to do that, but it requires your effort. It requires effort on your part, right? It's not sustainable to continue to run and run and run. right? Eventually you run out of steam. Eventually you hit a wall, right? And it's scary at first when we are coming into this work with all of these negative associations and all of these preconceived thoughts and messages that we've absorbed from other people. It can be very, jarring. It can feel like, no, you know what? I'm just going to keep engaging in my avoidant behaviors because that's easier. But it's easier for a time and it's not sustainable, like I said, and it won't be easy forever. Once we become aware, it gets harder and harder and harder, right? But once we start practicing emotional resilience, it gets easier and easier and easier. That's the beauty of it. It starts out being more work, but eventually you get so good at it that it's easier and easier each time, right? As long as I've been doing this work, it's still a practice. I still have times where I'm so muddled and I'm not grounded and I'm not centered and I'm not paying attention to myself and I don't know what I'm feeling. I have certain emotions that I'm like, oh, I would rather not deal with shame, or I would rather not look at fear, right? But you start small and you start with a willingness and the energy and the intention behind it, and allow yourself to move through the process, right? So I hope that something I said today resonated. If you want, please reach out to me on my channels. I would love to chat with you. I would love to hear about how you feel, what you feel. If you struggle with certain emotions, let's talk about it. Right? It's okay to say, hey, I don't like anger. Growing up, I had an angry dad that was abusive, and so I don't want to be anything like that. You're nothing like that. Your anger is your anger, and how you manage it is going to be up to you. And the way that you harm yourself and others is when you avoid it or you try to run from it. But when you bring that anger in and you say, okay, I'm noticing this message, there's some information here for me, then all you do is grow. All you do is help yourself and help those around you by not making other people responsible for your emotions, and by ultimately guiding you to take action that is best for you and best for your community. So don't be afraid of those emotions, right? I mean, it's easy to say that. And if you're afraid, look at that too, right? But consider just reframing how you see those emotions. Consider just paying more attention to yourself, to your actions, to the way your body feels, to the thoughts you're having, and looking at them all as a connected, triangle. Not looking at, oh, I'm thinking this, so I must be feeling that, but looking at it in community with yourself as a whole, right? We are not just one thing. We are a combination of things. We are a complex system of things, but they all work together. It's an ecosystem. So looking at the ecosystem, looking at the emotional triangle, and getting to know yourself and getting to know those emotions that you carry is really how you begin the process of being more emotionally resilient. So I love you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.